He's on full commission and tithing on with a full commission job, like with a varied income.
Well, because you have a varying income. So basically you have an irregular income and you're asking how to tithe. Also,
yeah, and then
income?
some of those, and the way his pay structure is set up is like he gets paid on that scale to also account for his own expenses that he does for his job. You know, he pays for everything out of his pocket for his job.
They actually plug his expense reimbursement into his paycheck. Is that correct?
Yes, yes.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, this gets a little bit fuzzy when you start adding in those variables.
Mhm.
And one point in budgeting, whether it's tithes or anything else in the budget, when you have an irregular income, is functionally what you're doing is you're budgeting off of the average. How we set up the budget in that regard, because I have an irregular income as well. So basically what we do is we set the budget up to where it's in the top-down format. So the top of the budget is the most important things. The bottom of the budget is the least important. So when the money comes in, if you have more than your average, what you do is you basically go down further in the list. If you have less than your average, you go less in the list. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So if you're budgeting, tithe is first, and then typically I recommend food after that, groceries specifically, then gas and housing, utilities, and then so if you have extra, then it just goes further down the list. Functionally, that's how you do a commission base. Now, if it's one of those where it's a little bit rocky, it's a little bit seasonal, then your emergency fund probably needs a little bit heavier to handle the downtime. So even if you have a starter emergency fund, that starter needs to be bigger than most. So you might be $2,500 to $4,000 as a minimum. For our household, if we have to use an emergency fund, and if it goes below $2,500, then we feel we went below zero because that's our minimum. You just set your minimum a little bit higher. With the budgeting question, go top down and you get more in than what you actually planned, then you just go further down the list. Now, separately with the tithing, I'm very simple. So I just go off my personal with this. If when you look through the workbook that I sent, when the scripture says for how much, whether it's gross or net, it says all. When we receive any income in our household, we tithe off of all on it. We tithe off the gross, so the whole thing. If your budget is to tithe, and then you do it off the average, then when your reality comes in, you just adjust it accordingly.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you just budget for your plan, and then you adjust it accordingly when it comes in. Now, as far as the expenses part is concerned, technically you wouldn't have to tithe off of that because that's not really income.
Right.
I mean, that's technical. For me, I try not to get into too many technicalities when I'm trying to get a blessing from God. So I just go ahead and let it ride. If I'm doing 11%, man, I just did 11%. All right, so I'm just going to let it go.
Right.
So that's just my personal thing. I don't really nickel and dime the 10% per se. I make sure that I actually hit the 10%. If it goes over because of something extra, then I just count that as, an extra blessing. So we tithe off of everything that comes in except for a tax refund. So if we happen to get a tax refund, we don't tithe off of that because we already tithe that money in our regular paycheck. Now, we will give an offering on that, but it's not a tithe. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Short and skinny, budget, top, bottom, funded. If you get more than your average, you just go further on the list. With the tithing question, I would just tithe off the gross, regardless of the expenses that's inside.
He's on full commission and tithing on